Hey guys, this is Skullgrin, and today I'm gonna be talking about fixing joints on toys with Pledge Future floor polish. So this is Pledge Future. I bought it a few years ago, and it's lasts pretty long. It's Pledge Premium Floor Finish. I don't know if oh yeah, it's called Pledge with Future because Pledge bought the company that makes Future floor polish. This stuff is actually pretty good for tightening joints if you use it correctly. It's very liquidy, so expect it to be very wet when you put it. But it'll dry without many bubbles or clumps if you do it correctly. And it's good for basically things such as tightening joints on toys, like ball joints on Transformer figures. Like for an example, Skull Cruncher here. I've already tightened him a bit, but I will go over it again because I just want to fix the joint tightness a bit more. Because after a while, the Pledge kind of eats away over time when you move it. But this guy had extremely floppy joints. Like you could shake the legs and they would move like nothing, just like and they would shake. But Pledge added friction and tightened the ball joints. So here I'm gonna show, this is the ball joint here on him. So you take the legs off, and what I've also done too is I also did the hatch with floor polish too. It came very nice and smooth. See, like you don't see a lot of blemishes. And it's already dried only after a few hours. There, it actually looks pretty good. You don't have to do this because it looks super glossy when the original silver was a little matte. But I do it in order to protect the paint. It might need just a little bit more on the top here because it's hard to see, but I don't like the way it dried at the top there, but it dried okay at the bottom. And these claws tend to also become loose. And I tightened them a bit by putting floor polish into the grooves here and by putting it onto the claws panels. Unfortunately, though, it seems that one of them still didn't get that tight anyways. The gun used to fall out, but now it snugs in tightly thanks to the floor polish. So also what I do, you can get something like a dish or a cup, because this stuff is very wet and it can tend to pour out very quickly. Sometimes it shoots out from the bottle a little too easily. So you would want to watch out for that. So this stuff is very liquidy. It hardly ever dries, which is a great thing in it. I guess as long as it's kept airtight, it lasts long. It smells bad a little, but it dries very quickly. So what you would want to do is pour a bit of it into a dish like this. Then get a clean brush. Make sure that the brush is clean, even though this stuff does not really eat at paint much. And then what you'd want to do is you'd get a figure, lightly apply the floor polish to the ball joints, and you would probably want to wait overnight before handling it again. And then if you want to, you can either put a secondary coat or just leave it at that. But I would give this a full day for drying because even though it dries quick, it's very wet and it might not dry the way you want unless you wait an entire 24 hours or 14 hours at the very least. So just be warned about that. But overall, this stuff actually works really good. And it's an excellent product. So after you're done there, what you would want to do with Skull Cruncher is you'd want to make these tighter by adding Pledge in between here and over here. I actually coated the rubber parts entirely of pledge. So that way the rubber doesn't dry out or go bad. Even though it's glossy, the Pledge Future is very glossy, and that's one thing I will warn people about. But in this case, I feel that it worked really well. I like the way it came. It's not very noticeable. If you don't want these parts to look too glossy, I guess you could spray it with matte afterwards or something. But I'm fine with it. It also helps to preserve the rubber, which is a great thing. And I like to try to make rubber parts last as long as they possibly can on a toy. And it kind of annoys me when they use rubber except for its flexibility. With this, you'd want to, if this joint here is too tight, you'd want to circle a bit of pledge over here on the toy tail connector piece right there. And then you'd want to put a bit of pledge inside the gun over here where the opening is here to make sure that it holds snug and secure from now on. Because on some skull crunches the gun falls out. Be careful not to put too much or it might end up being too tight. But it will wear and tear over time, so you might want to if you play with the figure a lot, you might want to add a coating every once in a while to maintain the figure's joint tightness. Then another thing is where the claw grippers are here, where he holds the claw. You might want to put a bit of it in between here, so that way it will hold tight when you use the claws as sealed. I need to pour a little bit more of this first. Sometimes it doesn't come out good anymore because I've been using it for so long that the thing has become gummed up. There we go. You don't need a lot of it. It's just that it kind of goes around like a liquid ocean and it kind of, so like I was saying, I'm not too satisfied with how the tip here came, so that's another thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add another coat on here, the tip. Do a good protective coating there. Make sure that there's no air bubbles, because you want to make sure that it dries evenly and fluid and doesn't leave any air bubbles. But luckily you probably won't have that problem, but because the stuff actually does go very even, it dries quick and it goes even. Now another thing you might like to do is that the claw hinge joints sometimes don't get tight enough with just paint on their tips. Sometimes you have to kind of put a bit in the in-between parts of the grooves of the forearm in order for it to work, because you want it to be as tight as possible so there's an actual friction and grip onto these for when you put the claw back in. And so you will have to want to put some in there with a very small brush like what I'm doing here. Make sure that not too much pledge goes onto the forearm so the forearm doesn't have little splotches of gloss, but will hold together right, you know. And then another bit here, right in here. Yep, that's how you make sure that this figure holds together. So we put that there like this. Another thing you might want to do is this. On some skull crunchers, the friction is not that good on the thigh joints. So how you fix that is you unclasp this piece here. And what you do is you put a bit of pledge onto the joint here to tighten the friction a bit. And it should allow for better tightness when it dries. It does increase the friction a lot, and it helps to make the toy a bit tighter. So that way the thigh joint will actually have a secure grip. And so we'll get the other thigh. We'll do the same thing. This one's probably going to be super tight because I already did it several times, but I just wanted to update on it, and I figured it would be the perfect opportunity to show you guys how you work with Pledge Future floor polish. So you put it on the hip joints, on the swivels, and this should really help to increase the friction and the tightness. Great thing about Pledge is that when it frictions against itself, it actually has a lot of, if two sides of Pledge connect with each other, there's a lot of friction, so it does hold tight. I also did some things like I protected the white plastic, which chips off easily with a coating of Pledge. It's not necessary to do another coating, so I'll leave it be for this run on the joint tightening work. I'll show how on Croc how the joint tightening head has improved the claws. You can see how you can see the friction is tight. Before it wasn't that tight. This version was a little tighter than my Skull Cruncher, so it holds in well. On my Skull Cruncher, the left arm is not really that tight, so it's hard to create extra friction. But if you manage to get the right level of tightness and friction, this is how it should be. And you should hear a sound that's like rubber rubbing against another piece of plastic, creating a friction noise. And so that's how you know that you actually got it to be tight. This one I didn't really bother with the hips because the hips are quite tight and fine on their own, but as you can see how the swivel is actually kind of loose and turns easy. There's no friction on that swivel, to let you understand how the tightness is not really that great on that part of the body on Skull Cruncher or Croc, and why Pledge is good. Another thing I did was I used it to tighten Quake's Titan Master, but I might have to disassemble to fix the floppy knee piece. These legs became so loose after play that he would fall down under his own weight, and the leg would bend and he would just fall backwards like this when you would stand him up. But now he doesn't do that anymore. Now he's nice and tight. Might be a little too glossy, but I decided to gloss the chest because the chest in robot mode is spray painted with a blue, dark navy blue paint that's glossy, while on Quake's Titan Master Chasm, it's like a dry, flat looking blue plastic that kind of looks fake or knockoff-ish. So I decided to gloss it, and it dried very evenly. It came nice. Hip joints are tight now. Leg joints are very tight because pledge fell into the crevices of the hinges where it was loose. Only thing is the neck is still not really that tight when you turn it into a head because I didn't pledge it. And that might be next if I decide to unscrew him and then pledge the ball joint on the head and then reassemble. So now it's nice and tight. Now it's actually difficult to turn the legs here to make them come down. But I'll show how loose the head is in a second. Let's see. See what I mean? Very loose, and sometimes it looks down, so I probably will disassemble it and apply some pledge in order for it to hold tight and for it to stay where it's supposed to. I actually had to pledge this piece here after a long time of play because the joint for the gun actually loosened over time and it actually kind of lost its grip. And you don't want to do it on the gun's 5mm peg because then you'll make it too tight to fit into hands. So it's better to do it on the tank barrel's peg hole. And so yeah, that's it for today. These are the three figures that really benefit from joint tightening, in my opinion. I guess you could even maybe put the joint tightening on Mindwipe's rubber parts if you want. So you could probably coat them, but it would look a little too glossy and it would take away from that organic look that the brown rubber has. So I would probably not do that. Skull Cruncher here, once he's dried, will be nice and snug and the legs will hold excellently. Put another coat here. So yeah, this will greatly improve the figures and make them easy to use for play. As you can see here, the hatch, it already dried nicer and it looks a lot better, and you can't see the disparity from before. It's perfect now. You can tell it's glossed, but it's balanced out enough, and once it dries it'll look good. It'll be pretty great. So it's worked out. It'll protect the hatch's paint from being scratched off and stop the rubber mold degradation by blocking oxygen from the piece. So, and it'll also make the hatch go in more tightly as well and hold and make it easier to pull out without scratching off the paint. So that's why I tend to do the hatch when I pledge him. I was gonna leave it on this one, but I decided to do it as well. And I have more than one, and so I experiment with the pledge before I make full decisions on how I should treat it with each figure. But it came pretty good on this, and it holds, and it's very tight. And so now, don't forget to like and subscribe, and to share my videos, Skullgun reviews, and I'm putting this guy together later on and showing how his joints will be a bit tighter in part 2 from this video.